This is your home for the most competitive football in the state of Michigan. Your home for the most comprehensive coverage week in and week out. This is the Mac Attack with Zack and Zack.
Zack, always great to be with you back in the basement just ahead of week 3 this coming Friday. We've got power rankings, we've got previews, we've got it all.
Starting to feel a little bit normal here in the basement. I like it.
Yeah, the first 2 weeks, the Mac Red, knock on wood, has gotten all 6 games off. There's been some issues. Those have been injuries.
That's going to come every season, so that's normal as well.
Though I think some coaches will tell you the volume of injuries correlates somewhat, maybe not directly, but somewhat to the start, stop, start, and the lack of run-up, the lack of scrimmage, the lack of game preparation, that kind of stuff. It makes the kids more fragile.
I believe that. I totally buy into that.
But again, I'm not saying that's going to derail this season. My overall point here is 2 weeks in, very good. Very good.
And some really good football games too. I mean, we're looking at offenses that are starting to kick into high gear. We have people who are starting to find the rhythm of their team, and it's really shaping up to be a really interesting week 3 here with some of the games we got on the schedule.
So, Zach, before we get into week 3, let us get into our Mac Attack Power Rankings. Off the top, I did that last week, didn't I?
Something along those lines. That's all right, man. You got your hands full.
I know, but how much longer can I keep making that excuse?
1.
At least for this week, right?
Yeah.
At least for this. Stevenson at number 1. Zach, they're 2-0, and they seem to win no matter what. I like teams that are able to do that. It's one thing to be able to, when things go right, put up all kinds of offensive numbers and surge to victory. That's a good thing. It's a great thing when you can win ugly, and that is exactly what they did against a very good Macomb, Dakota team last week, winning 12-7. There's a huge win for them, and look, they picked up right where last season left off.
I agree. Yeah.
And the offense, it needs to improve. I'm not giving the offense a pass, but the offense has played enough to where the defense has been able to propel to victory, right? That we've not seen teams like Eisenhower be able to do that, right? That's where they're struggling. The defense for Eisenhower is excellent, but the offense hasn't been able to seal the deal, as it were.
Yeah, but they've been gelling very nicely, complementing one another on the football field. And when I start to look at this team, this 2-0 Stevenson Titans team, I get a little bit of a glimmer of like that state championship Romeo Bulldogs team, where they weren't necessarily the best team on the field every week, but they won, and they won in impressive fashion. You've got a guy like Jordan Ramsey who has just been a beast this season, really getting their offense going from the ground, and I like what I'm seeing from Stevenson. But
right now he's the max leading. I have the stats that I have in my possession. I have him as the max leading rusher. It could be Caden Sloan, but I don't have the numbers to make that the case.
We're only as good as the numbers were given.
Right.
But
so I've got Jordan Ramsey with 169 rushing yards through 2 games.
And that's going to go up against a tough Chippewa Valley defense. And, coming up next week. This Stevenson team, I mean, I like what I'm seeing. I think they're going to progress, but I think they're going to continue to be tested week in and week out.
Dude, it's a test week in, week out in this division. And Zach, we talked about it earlier, the notion of 5-0 in the red this year. I mean, it seems impossible.
2.
Certainly nothing is impossible. Dakota at number 2 for me, Zach. They're 1-1. It was a tough loss to Stevenson. We just talked about it. But I see the athletes. I see the talent. It is there. And that's why I give Stevenson so much credit for winning that game last week. It wasn't that they didn't come up against a good football team. It was that they figured out the Rubik's Cube. They solved that Dakota offense that had just pounded away at Chippewa Valley in week 1. And look, they're going to have to bounce back pretty quickly, Zach, because the surprise of the red, at least to me, I know over in Grosse Pointe South, they are not themselves the surprise of the red. They're where they think they should be, but to me at 2-0, Grosse Pointe South is the surprise in the red, and maybe they should be in this spot. They're going to have a chance to take this spot this Friday against Dakota, but Zach, right now, I've got the Cougars at 2.
So do I, Zach. I mean, and this is, simply put, it's a team that, lost to Stevenson last week. So how could they stay in the number one spot? We knew that wasn't going to happen.
We said the winner of that game was going to go to 1 in the power ranking.
And they did. And that was our game of the week last week.
Promises made, promises kept.
Dakota has to bounce back against this Grosse Pointe South team. I mean, there's no two ways about it because Grosse Pointe South is
a huge game.
They're going up to be potentially 3-0 in their opening season in the MAC Red. I don't think any of us did, but in Grosse Pointe South's defense, I think this is the first time they're going to be tested in this upcoming game as they go up against Dakota.
It's going to be the hardest test out of the first 3 if you include the first 2, like you mentioned there.
But who would have thought at the beginning of the season that we're talking about potentially Dakota being at 1-2 and Grosse Pointe South at 3-0? Not necessarily going to happen, but it's a possibility. It's out there right now.
It is on the table. Zach and I in agreement. Dakota at 2.
3.
Zach, this is where I have Chippewa Valley. They're 1-1. Look, if Ryan Schuster keeps playing the way that he has, 343 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. I mean,
dude's a beast.
Yeah, and the combination of Schuster and Maddox Altamirano, I mean, they have been just electric. I mean, of the 343 passing yards Ryan Schuster has 209 of them have gone to Maddox. And so you look at that ability right there. And I was concerned coming out of not greatly concerned coming out of week 1. It was a weird offseason. So, what I saw, you think, okay. And then in the first quarter last week, I thought, oh, man, I am starting to get concerned about this Chippewa Valley team. And then just like that, things started to change, and they changed very quickly as Schuster seemed to get more comfortable. Part of that could be Romeo's defense. We're not exactly sure yet, but I'll tell you what I saw is a kid with confidence, standing deep in the pocket, able to make big throws. That's exciting.
And don't forget, though, they also have Zion Mitchell, who can take it to the ground. As you want to talk stats, as far as stats go, we've got him at number 3.
And I didn't even mention the Housey twins.
So you're looking at a Chippewa Valley team this team's solid. This team is solid. Week in and week out, they can go out and win if they have to. And, a lot of people might be saying right now, how do you have 2 teams that are sitting at 1-1?
It's a fair question.
Ranked above a team that's 2-0 right now. And strictly, it's because of just the opponents that they faced. And, when I'm looking at this, we're not seeing a lot of offense from Grosse Pointe South. They're winning their games, but we're not seeing a huge production from the offense. You don't have the backs putting up big yards. You don't have the quarterback throwing for distance. So those are things that when they come up against a team like Dakota, Chippewa Valley, Stevenson, where does that put them? I still got to take all 3 of those teams over Grosse Pointe South at this point.
Well, let's get into that.
4.
Because that's where I have Grosse Pointe South, Zach. They are 2-0, and should they be higher? I'll be honest with you, probably. And a lot of people, if you're doing your power rankings at home, first of all, if you're doing power rankings at home, God bless you, seriously. But for what you said, Zach, for all the things that you said, and look, this team, you look at Anthony Bernard at quarterback, he's made some big plays. They have a guy like Will Johnson. This team is not incapable. They haven't run the ball a ton, but I just here's what I like about them, Zach, and I think they will move higher. I don't think they're going to stay where they are. There'll be some separation, but here's what I like, Zach. They haven't blown anybody away with dazzling offense. The defense has been really good, but they've been able to capitalize on the mistakes of their opponents, whether it's on special teams, whether it's on offense, defense, and that's something that will come in handy down the road. A lot of times you'll see it, and this is something that the Detroit Lions, whom we love and hate at the same time, are famous for, is not being able to capitalize on the mistakes of opponents, and then down the road you wonder to yourself, will that cost you? In fact, the Lions last weekend, they forced a turnover, settled for 3 instead of a touchdown. Ultimately, the game was won at the end by the Lions, but it wouldn't have gotten to that point had they been able to be more successful early on against the Cardinals. And so you see that with Grosse Pointe South, the ability to capitalize, and that's why they're 2-0. And that's why I have them at 4. What I would like to see from them, and maybe it's not me, maybe it's me just not paying attention, but for them to take the initiative and for them to start putting their opponents on their backs more quickly. I think they've got it in them. I think they do.
You want to see them more control the tempo of a game.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And not have to be, I think that opening game against Romeo went up 14-0 in the first half. They relied on, like you said, the mistakes made by the other teams where they were capitalizing on that. And hats off, that creates a great football team.
They've come from behind twice.
That's how you win. But long term, does that pan out against teams like Chippewa Valley and Stevenson, who might make less mistakes during their game. You don't have those opportunities. You have to be out there striking and striking fast.
And so people are at home saying, Zach, what you've described is Stevenson. You have them at 1, and you've got Grosse Pointe South at 4. But what you said right there, Stevenson has done this against Dakota.
And who else?
They've done it against the higher caliber
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower,
who has
they got onto Eisenhower's defense.
Great defense, absolutely.
Now they didn't pound away at him, but they were able to solve it enough to win. And so that's why Stevenson is 1, and that's why in our book Grosse Pointe South is 4. Right, but the mobility, the ability of Grosse Pointe South to move higher, I think, is there and inevitable.
5.
All right, Zach, there's a clear separation between the first 4 and the last 2, at least in this moment. I have Eisenhower at number 5. They're 0-2. The defense, Zach, has been excellent. It's unfortunate that they've not been able to win a football game with the way that defense has played. Almost any other team in the league had that kind of defense. They'd be 2-0 and 2-0 probably pretty easily at this point. But the offense, it needs so much work. And, they've started to shuffle around a little bit. In week 1, Kyle O'Reilly got the start. I think he got the start in week 2, but was lifted pretty quickly. Preston Crum, the freshman, ended up taking the bulk of the snaps.
Taking the snaps, nice.
And that's where we are right now for Eisenhower. They have more questions than they do answers offensively, but the defense has been exactly what we thought they would be. It's been excellent. Almost impossible to score. They give you no wiggle room. The pressure is constant. They've got guys flying around the ball. The middle linebacker, Anthony Cardamone, is just an absolute stud. Dalton DeWicki up front. It's just a really, really good defense. But I have so many questions about the offense, and I don't know from where those answers come. We're going to have to find out.
Yeah,
is it the freshman Preston Crum? I don't know.
I don't know if we necessarily will get those answers this season, Zach. I really don't. I don't think
you'll get them this week.
I'm saying this season. I'm worried about their offense. I think the season's short. I think you've got, especially if you're relying on a freshman quarterback.
This week will mark the halfway point, by the way.
So if you're relying on your freshman quarterback to hop in there and fill the void, that's going to be very difficult to do.
He went 8 of 19 for 103 yards last week, which 42% completion. But again, we're talking about a freshman. I got to tell you, when I saw the switch, I thought, and then I saw the numbers, I thought,
no,
not bad.
I'm not saying it's a bad move.
No, I get you.
Is this season going to be the season where you really get some production out of that? And then
it's a fair question.
Going back,
question.
There, Ike's never been great at putting up numbers on the ground. You know what I mean? The run game hasn't been great, and when you look at those components, you can't win games if your offense isn't putting points on the board.
They really miss Blake Rasteig under center, or nobody. I guess nobody goes under center anymore, but they really miss Blake Rasteig at the quarterback spot. Zach, one more.
6.
Yeah, for Romeo, Zach, I've got him at the bottom. Injuries mounting, so are the questions. And you talk about timing and urgency. Like, Romeo's got to figure it out right now, both sides of the ball.
And they weren't going to move on my list either. They're staying at number 6. They lost again. How could you move them? So I don't think there should be any surprise to anybody. But you talk about a team that needs to get moving now. This is their best opportunity. They're taking on Eisenhower, who's, as we just mentioned, their offense is struggling. Their defense is tough, but Romeo has also shown that they've been able to put points on the board. They're not unfamiliar with their offensive threat. They've got some great run threats in their arsenal.
Absolutely. And you lose Radke, but Brian St. Clair is, to me, I want to see more of him going forward. We'll talk about that in a minute.
And when I look at that, I see a team that is really close to just getting a victory that they need, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions here.
Well, I'll tell you what, and we'll get into this, in just a couple of minutes, but Zach, the number 5 and number 6 on our board go head-to-head this week in Washington Township. One of these two teams is going to be 0-3 and going to have it's going to be it's
going to be tough for one of these two teams.
But here's the good news, Zach, and everybody knows this, is that 0-3 this year, if you get to 0-4, you've qualified for the playoffs by virtue of playing in 4 games. That's the only threshold this year. And I'm not saying that teams are giving up or are quitting, but the good news is you can walk into an 0-3 locker room and know that you are likely still going to make the playoffs. All you got to do is play one more game.
And isn't that ultimately what you're fighting for anyway?
In
that postseason.
In a season like this, it has to be, because you're guaranteed a seventh game. Everybody's going to get a playoff game. So, Zach, we'll run it down really quickly. You and I are in agreement. Stevenson, Dakota, Chippewa Valley, Grosse Pointe South, Eisenhower, and Romeo. Those are your Week 3 Mac Attack power rankings. And, Zach, let's get right into the 3 games, and we'll start with the Alma Game of the Week. The Game of the Week is brought to you by Alma College, where your life's work is waiting. And, Zach, you and I talked about this. Chippewa Valley and Stevenson ultimately for us was the game of the week. It's on our Twitter poll. You can check it out at Mac Attack Pod. And Zach, for Chippewa Valley and Stevenson, both teams coming off of nice wins. The Big Reds really got their offense going against Romeo. While, the Stevenson defense was as good as ever against a really good Dakota offense. Yeah, and this is an interesting game because you've got Stevenson trying to maintain their number 1 spot, at least in our rankings. But even this Chippewa Valley team is better than their 1-1 record shows, in my opinion. Oh, no doubt.
And I think that they're finally getting to the point where their offense makes sense. It's clicking. They know what they have to do. Ryan Schuster is just throwing bombs left and right, and the dude is coming here to play. And when you see
and you stand back and watch, man, it's so nice
when you get a team like Chippewa Valley start to find their home again. That first game they were struggling to really get in that Chippewa Valley rhythm that we're used to. Now that it's there, man, we might be looking at the new number 1 team in the Mac Attack power rankings.
Well, Zach, I've thought about that. We mentioned it before. Schuster to Altamirano has been just a lethal combination. Can they stretch the field and open things up? They've got other weapons, right? Like I said last time, we didn't mention the Housey twins. We didn't mention Cephas Harris. There are other Zion Mitchell. There are other options, and that's to me what makes this team so difficult to handle. Is if they can figure both of those things out, and it seems like more or less that they have figured those things out. I think you're right, Zach. This team could quickly climb back towards the top of this list. Now they're going to have to win this game, and it's not going to be easy. We talk about offense. I need more from the Titans, Zach, and I know it's in there. They have the talent between Ramsey and Kwiatkowski, and I believe in Biagio Madonna. He threw a really nice touchdown pass last week. There is opportunity here for this Stevenson team to find a little more of that offensive rhythm. They just got to kind of fall into it and get rolling. But I think it's in there. There's that rhythm. They got to find it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. It's that finding a way to win mentality a little bit that we talked about, and Chippewa Valley is just always such a good football team. I just can't get over how year in and year out, no matter what the situation is, they're always going to be a contender. At least
credit
for as
to
long
Scott
as we've been,
and
as long as we've been covering it and then some. But man, it's hard for me. I think I got to go with Stevenson on this one. I think they're going to come in. It's a home game for Stevenson. Who doesn't like that, especially in these situations where it's where it's probably going to be a very close game. But their offense needs to pick it up a little bit. It can't just be relying on that defense to come out and stop this really hot Chippewa Valley offense. That's going to be really hard. They've got a mission this week for the Stevenson Titan defense, and we'll see if they can come through. I think they can, but only time will tell.
Zach, I'm going to go the other direction. I'm going to take Chippewa Valley here. You mentioned the offense. You mentioned the clicking we're seeing from that Big Red offensive machine. I think Chippewa Valley wins this game. I think that they're able to continue to score points offensively. Is it going to be what we've seen the last couple of weeks? I think they've scored 57 points in 2 games. I don't expect them. So what is that? 28 points, something like that. I don't know how good at math, but
average it out.
Something like that. I don't think they'll get close to that. I think you're more in the low 20s as opposed to the upper 20s if you can get that far. But I'll be honest with you, I think if you can get to 17, 20 points here from what I've seen from Stevenson's offense, unless it kicks into another gear, which again I think is possible. The road thing, I can't tell how the home field advantage plays this year.
Yeah,
I think
a little different.
But I think ultimately it's not so much about the crowd around you. It's about being familiar with the locker room you walk out of, the locker room you walk back into, the field you play on, the things you see visually, you're used to it. It's home. But I'm taking Chippewa Valley in our game of the week. Travel to the heart of the Mitten and check out Alma College. You'll find a campus that feels like home with small classes and endless opportunities. The Alma commitment means on-time graduation guarantees, academic career planning, and $2,500 to explore the world outside of the classroom. The Macomb Red Game of the Week brought to you by Alma College. Zach, it's great to have Alma on board.
Yeah, super excited about that one.
They say on time, I say on air because we're on air right now. But yes,
fair enough.
On-time graduation. And so the Alma College Game of the Week, Zach and I are split. Dakota and Grosse Pointe South. Zach, I think this one had the opportunity to also be the Game of the Week. It was in our conversation. And, for all the talk about everybody else, nobody right now is feeling better than Grosse Pointe South.
Oh, no.
Nobody.
You're riding high at this point.
What an entrance.
Yeah. And the only thing
WWE style entrance, like so glamorous.
The only thing you're
physical.
mad about right now are the Mac Attack Power Rankings that don't have you ranked higher.
The only thing you're mad about is these two morons you're listening to talk right now, right?
But here's the good news. You can change that. You can change that with a win against Dakota. I think that this is the biggest test that Grosse Pointe South is going to have this season after walking over the first two teams that they faced. Now we're coming up on a Grosse Pointe South team that is really, I think, truly going to see this season what MAC football truly is. And, man, Dakota's going to be a tough opponent for them.
Well, see, I'm excited. I'm excited for Grosse Pointe South because they get that exact chance you're talking about, Zach. They don't have to prove anything to you and I, but I am curious to see, and now I'm going to get to see it in this game against Dakota. To me, Dakota is the most talented. They were the most talented team in the MAC Red. I believe they have the most individual talent if you stack it up. But the good news is Grosse Pointe South, to me, has the most talent, to everybody, really, has the most talented player in the whole conference. And so I'm very excited to see how those two things mesh with each other. And I think Dakota, Zach, they got to be scratching their head a little bit coming out of last week where, they didn't play terribly, but they left points on the board, and you can't do that against a team like Stevenson. I'm pretty sure you can't do it against a team like Grosse Pointe South either. We know Grosse Pointe South will make you pay for mistakes. It's how they've won their first two games.
Sure.
They're not allowed. They do not tolerate that kind of mistakes. Dakota's going to have to limit those, and to me, it's a mental issue, and I think that's more correctable than if it was a fixable issue. They got out of their own element last week. I don't know how it happened.
Yeah,
and credit to Stevenson. That's really how it happened.
Really, no offensive production from Dakota last week. You had that. I think that one score came off of a blocked punt towards the tail end of the game, which gave them a fighting chance against Stevenson.
They had a missed field goal and a touchdown negated by a penalty.
And see, those are the little mistakes that are going to cause you to lose against teams like Grosse Pointe South. I mean, because this is going to be a pretty even matchup as far as I'm concerned. But, the fact that Drosky isn't putting up big yards right now, and they've been putting Caden Sloan in the Wildcat, and so at times Drosky not even lining up at the quarterback spot. I was just going to say, though, against a team like Grosse Pointe South, though, this Dakota team has some real threats on the ground. You're talking.
Well, you're not going to throw against Grosse Pointe South anyway.
Exactly. That's not going to be part of your strategy.
It plays
with Sloan and Stepney,
good matchup.
I mean, come on. This is going to be an interesting game to watch. If these guys put up big yards on the ground, man, I think it's Dakota's game to lose, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Zach, we're just not going to make any friends down the east side of the
Prove
division.
us wrong. I'm
taking Dakota.
I always liked being the underdog back in the day.
Yes, you like being the underdog, but you hate the people that make you the underdog, like you and I.
True.
Right? You know what I mean? Like
we'll be eating our words.
Well, will we? I don't think so. I'm taking Dakota.
Yeah.
You?
Yeah, no,
yeah,
Dakota, yeah.
So Zach and I in agreement, Dakota at Grosse Pointe South. We're taking the Cougars, and Zach, this leaves us with one more. And of all the talk about the first two games, this one to me, in a playoff scenario, this one would I'd make this the game of the week if there were playoffs involved, because one of these teams is going to be eliminated from the playoffs right here and right now.
Right.
But in this season, that's not going to happen. But one of these two teams is going to be 0-3 between Romeo and Eisenhower. And I mean, that's over the last 10, 15, 20 years.
You wouldn't expect that.
It's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
But
here we are.
You know what part of that is, Zach? Part of that is Grosse Pointe South. The elevation of the MAC Red top to bottom has made everything so much more difficult.
That's a great point. You don't have a weak link anymore. There are days where you're not going to get that gimme win like we saw last year.
Let's be honest. These teams would be they both played Grosse Pointe South already. Both of these teams would be 1-1 if this was last year. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah. Fair.
Fair. Is that 99 times out of 100? 99 times out of 100, both of these teams are 1-1 right now.
Yeah,
now
that's not the case. We've got a better team. We got better competition.
But look what it does. Look what one switch does to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're looking at a team like
T-shirt won't stop staring at me, making me very uncomfortable.
He's wearing sunglasses. How can you tell? A little shout out to DB Cooper.
And the money he
took. But okay, you got Romeo at home for the first time this season. They've been itching to get back on Barnbow.
I think this is really important. Now, we talked about home road. To me, Zach, for Romeo, this is important.
It does make a difference, I think.
You're home.
Yeah.
Right? And now at Romeo, it's even more homey. Zach, when you and I, if you listen to the podcast, you know this, while we are MAC people, Zach and I are Romeo grads, football games, you weren't even really home then. Because you had to get on a bus from the high school to get...
It's not at the school.
But it is now.
It is now.
And so with the addition of the high school on that property, I think, Zach, it makes it even more home confines. And they walk across the parking lot as opposed to getting on a bus for a handful of miles. And so I think that's a great point, Zach, that coming home, Romeo... This could not come at a better time.
Yeah, they've got a lot they need to fix, and when I say fix, I mean figure out who they are as a team.
Take Derek Zoolander into the puddle. Who am I?
Yeah, and they're asking themselves this question right now, and they don't know. But I think the missing piece that we've been talking a lot about that we haven't seen get the action that they necessarily
talking about Romeo.
Yeah, I'm talking about Brian St. Clair.
Absolutely.
I mean,
where is he?
He's that piece that could completely swing a game, and especially when you've got the passing game that's struggling a little bit. They're trying to figure out who their targets are. They've made some changes in the offensive line,
and I wonder about Ty Messner, Zach. I mean, he came out of the game last week. He took a really big hit. He got to his feet, went back down to his knees. I'm not saying he's not going to play, but. Well, I don't know.
Well, yeah, we'll see what happens this Friday.
If he doesn't, then what?
I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think it changes your game plan too much. I think you gotta attack on the ground.
I do too, but
I've been saying ground the entire podcast, but it's like these running backs are impressive, and when you got somebody like him in that position, and even a backup in Chase Alverson there who put up some yards before. I mean, that's
because Austin Radke broke his collarbone, I believe. He's out, and so that takes away a serious threat. And so you have to have a guy like Alverson step up.
How do you pick this one, Zach? Because in all honesty, I think it's whatever team wants it more at this point. And that's just the nature of where we're at. You're on the verge of going 0-3.
Yeah.
You're on the verge of really having some questions going into week 4. And this season doesn't get any easier after this. This is going to be your best chance for a win, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at Eisenhower, who made a quarterback change, and you look at Romeo, who's got all kinds of injury issues. You ask me how I pick it. It's so hard to do, and so I look at what I can trust. I look at Romeo right now. There's not a whole lot there that I can trust. I look at Eisenhower, and there is one thing that I can trust, and it is their defense. And so if we're talking about across the board, if I can trust one thing in one team, I have to pick that team. And so I'm taking Eisenhower on the road. I have little confidence in that pick, but I have much confidence in Eisenhower's ability to defend, and I look at Romeo. If they can get Brian St. Clair going, they have a chance to.
It's a different ballgame.
Absolutely. But for whatever reason, we haven't seen that. And I don't know. I do wonder about the continuity of the offensive line. If that's not part of this here. Look, you win as a team, lose as a team. To me, all statistics are team statistics, whether individual or not. But I do wonder if part of the reason they're having a hard time getting the running game going is because they're not getting the protection that they would have gotten maybe a year ago or 2 years ago.
That's fair. I mean, you say you trust Eisenhower's defense.
I do.
But at the same time, I haven't seen an Eisenhower offense that can put points on the board.
They're 0-2.
And I've said this before, I'll say it again. You don't put points on the board. I think if if Eisenhower wants to win this game, I think their defense is going to have to put up some points, because Romeo has proven to me that they can at least put points on the board. Romeo, they can score. They can be an offensive threat.
7 in the first game and 17 in the second game.
They have 14 in the first game.
That's right. It was 17-7, then 24-14.
So offense can hit.
31 points.
So in my opinion, I'm going to take that over the solid Eisenhower defense.
They're averaging over 2 touchdowns a game.
And I think if they keep that up, that wins this ball game.
Yeah, I mean, does this game end up like 10-3? I mean, would that surprise anybody?
No, not at all.
Or even like last week, 12-7 with Stevenson.
But what I don't want to see is another early Romeo lead.
They've taken them in both.
But that might work this week against Eisenhower. That might work because
you're more likely to hold.
Now their offense is going to have to be catching up. So if Romeo hits fast and hits hard in the beginning, then I think they got this game.
It's the only chance they'll have.
And I'm going to take Romeo over Eisenhower for that reason.
I'm with you. Zach, if they can do what you just said right there, they will win the game. If they do not do that specific thing, there is no question they will lose this game.
Out of the locker room with fire. That's how you have to start this game off. Like, that's what gets the win. I almost
feel like they should be instructed to, from the locker room or from wherever they walk out, like, you have to sprint. And like, you have to have your helmet on, and nobody stops moving until the whistle goes. And it's like literal caged dogs. Yeah. Like it's all you have right now.
Yeah. You need that adrenaline pumping. I mean, that's it. Your Friday night
somebody's got to hit somebody
at Barnabo for the first time this season. And I think the energy is going to be up. We're going to see elevated energy.
And you didn't think you were going to get them. You're going to get that crisp fall air like you thought you weren't going to get. So Zach, you and I are split twice out of 3. I have Chippewa Valley in the Alma College Game of the Week. You have Stevenson. You and I both have Dakota over Grosse Pointe South. I have Eisenhower. You have Romeo in that third game. Zach, I tell you what, I got to say, I think this might be the most enlightening week of football to this point. I think we're really going to learn. You take the first week, it's really hard to decide what you have. You take the second week and you can balance it against the first week, but that first week's still a little rough. Now you can take the third week and balance it against the first 2.
Yeah.
Plus with these matchups, I think things are going to be really clear, or more clear, when we sit back down on Saturday. Though if the games go the other way, we could descend into chaos. And that's fun, too.
We'll just have to wait and see what happens, because we'll be back, as always, on Saturday with the results of how this all shakes up. And I'm excited. I think week 3 is going to be a good week.
And in the meantime, Zach, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and always at 32inmain.com.
Thanks for listening to The Mac Attack with Zack and Zack. For more, visit 32inmain.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Mac Attack Pod. And don't forget to like The Mac Attack with Zack and Zack on Facebook. The Mac Attack is a proud member of the 32 in Main Network.